It's one of the things that I don't want to use more of at the moment, but I don't want to use the P word. But the pandemic has seen an acceleration in the use of and the development of hybrid advice. And certainly we've seen an amazing acceptance of some of the tools and processes used by clients. Certainly I was very surprised last year at the ability of some of my older clients that were in their 80s in terms of how they adapted to using technology. As more organizations start to capture the benefits of hybrid advice models, today we're going to look to explore if it will become the future of providing advice to clients in the UK. I think we need to sort of explore what the benefits, opportunities and challenges that will need to be considered as more and more organizations move to hybrid advice models. But before we start, a little bit of housekeeping about today. The presentation and the panel session that we've put together will last approximately 40 to 45 minutes, and we'll follow that up with a Q&A session at the end. All participants' cameras will be off except for those that are on the panel and presenting, and everyone will be muted. So if you want to ask a question, I know you've all started to use the chat box to let us know where you're from and what the weather's like, but if you want to use the chat box facility for any questions, or if you've got any technical queries, our events team are here and they'll be able to help you with the technical queries. But the questions, we'll capture them from the chat box facility, and at the end of today we'll actually go run through a Q&A session. If, however, there's lots of questions that we get and we're unable to answer them today, what we'll do is we'll follow that up straight after with a podcast where we'll just run through the remaining questions, and then they will follow to come onto the LIBF website in the next day or two. In terms of today, I'm really pleased to be joined by our guest speakers and panel members. And I'm joined by David Ellis, who's the Head of Strategic Partnerships at the Royal London Group. David has over 25 years experience working in senior distribution roles for a range of product providers. And in the past, these have included Aviva, L&G and MetLife. But he's been with Royal London now for over 13 years. And during this time, he's been responsible for leading the company's relationship with key nationals, networks, and also with service providers. David's going to do a short presentation in a moment and more of that. But then for our panel, we've got David, and we're also joined by Nick Hall, who's the Head of Advice from Wealth Wizards. And with over 25 years in senior advisory and management roles in financial planning, Nick's experience spans 5 major bank and building society advice models. He's also an experienced leader in designing and implementing new advice propositions and platforms, including automated advice solutions. He's also a chartered fellow of the London Institute of Banking and Finance and an investment expert with IMC. We also have, last but not least, he always asks me to say that, is Sam Turner, who's a consultant from Altus. Sam's worked in the financial services sector for over 15 years with a background in advice, retail investment platforms, and life and pensions. Now, Sam's responsible for maintaining Altus's view of the fintech market, and is particularly passionate about the role of technology in enriching the financial advice process, as well as making financial advice and guidance more accessible in the UK. And I think that's something that most advisory organisations would say is that accessibility is key as we move forward in the advice market. So we're going to start off with a presentation from David Ellis on how Royal London are supporting advice firms and advisors that are moving towards hybrid advice solutions. This is going to last us for about 10 minutes or so. So David, over to you, and thanks a lot for joining us.
Okay, thank you for that great introduction, Richard. Yeah, so my role for the next 10 minutes is to just get us all thinking about this subject of hybrid advice. So I thought the best way to do this was to share with you the key themes that I hear when I speak to Royal London's national partners in the market on this subject. By national partners, I mean the collective term for the big advice groups, the nationals, the networks, and the service providers. Dealing with them gives me a great position to be able to view what's going on right across the intermediary market. And at the moment, I would say that we're on the cusp of some quite innovative change in terms of how technology has been and is being applied to enhance the advice process. I think we're all facing quite an exciting future, and I hope by this short presentation at the start to facilitate some great questions later in the session. Okay, so I'll start by saying the national partners that I speak to are very driven by helping advisors adapt and thrive in the current digital environment that we live in. If advisors do well, the national partners will do well. And building on that first point, I'd like to know that none of them are really feeling threatened by full robo advice. So by full robo advice, we mean where the client deals themselves on an online journey. And they're not feeling threatened for two reasons. First of all, the customer as an individual is very unique and has often very complex needs. And as Ben Wright, the Director of Strategic Development at Tenet, has said, quite often, because of that complexity, the client gets kicked out of the process. In fact, many full advice businesses have spawned up in dealing with customers that fall out of an automated journey. A good example of that would be LifeSearch, a business that I have a lot of personal respect for. They pick up customers that drop out of automated journeys with aggregators like Compare the Market and Money Supermarket. They drop out because they just get a bit bamboozled with the process, or they come to the end of it and they don't get any cover, anything in place. And LifeSearch do a great job of personally supporting that customer to get them a much better outcome. The second reason why robo doesn't seem to be getting any traction is the fact that the very essence of advice is the human touch. Customers engage with advisors because of that human touch. And I speak from personal circumstance there. My first engagement with an advisor was involved in a death claim when a close family member died. And it wasn't really the pounds, shillings and pence that I valued at that critical time in my life. It was the support, the trust, the empathy, dare I say it, the care that the advisor showed to me and my family at that difficult time. And I don't think, and our national partners don't think, that robo can actually deliver that human touch, that care. And it was this human touch that was recently touched on in an article by Gemma Hall from Quilter when she talked about COVID accelerators. Gemma said that advisors should look to use technology and the ways that they engage with clients in these circumstances, these difficult circumstances, in a way that plays that human touch in as best as possible. So she encouraged advisors to use video conferencing rather than telephone calls, for example, in all client interactions, because the platforms are more intuitive and you're able to get that personal touch over. And similarly, those COVID accelerators have bubbled up in other places. An example where Royal London as a product provider has seen benefits is in the protection advice journey, where normally under usual circumstances, the advisor would sit down with the customer and help them complete the application form. Clearly during lockdown, they've not been able to do that. So what the advisor has done is used our send to client facility, where the application gets sent to the customer via a secure portal. The customer completes it and the advisor checks it before it gets sent in. And that has added speed to the whole process, allowing the customer to get cover quicker. And it has also, from our perspective as a provider, led to enhanced disclosure. Our post-sale check-in on those cases has seen that customers are more open and honest with the disclosure, which avoids problems in the future. So if we were all to sit back and think about these COVID accelerators, there are probably quite a few that we could list that in totality could add up to something quite beneficial in terms of a new model going forward. Another thing that our national partners are doing is they're monitoring quite closely adjacent markets and what's going on with other industries. So there was some commentary by Craig Ross from Sesame Bancorp Group about Amazon recently and how they've adapted to the changing environment to deliver what the customer wants. Amazon are certainly doing well, but for me, the best parallel would be to be drawn from Apple. If my teenage son wants to buy an iPad, he watches Apple technology experts presenting on video on his phone, and he buys the product via the Apple app on his phone. If I want to buy an iPad, I'll probably go on apple.com, I'll have a read around, I'll buy there, and I'll probably buy an Apple Care package because I quite want a bit of support post-sale in case I have any problems. If my elderly mother wants to buy an iPad, she'll drive into the Apple store in Manchester. She'll befriend the worker in the store who'll help her make her buying decision. And if there's any problems in the future, she'll drive back into the store in Manchester to get help and support. And I think there's a lot of learns there for the advice community in terms of how we can use technology and blend that human touch with technology to a greater or a lesser extent to deliver advice propositions that the customer would want. And as Ken Davey, the veteran of the industry, the chairman of Simply Biz, says, the future is probably high touch, high tech. It is using technology to do the heavy lifting in the advice process to allow that human touch, that care that advisors deliver in the most efficient way possible. Using technology, we can short circuit the fact-finding process by sending the information securely. Advisors can use best advice tools to source product based on client needs. And they can submit the case for filing and for compliance checking via back office systems. So a lot to be used to do that heavy lifting. So some real opportunities for us as an industry, for advice as a sector in this hybrid space. However, there are some concerns coming through in the interactions that I have with our national partners. And the first one is a recognition that for many, being a financial advisor is actually a lifestyle choice. We don't say that critically, we say that with complete admiration. Most of the advisors that I deal with have a brilliant blend of work and personal life. And with the efficiencies that a hybrid advice model might be able to bring, we're still unsure that the time that these models might save will be given back to serving more customers. We still have quite an advice gap in the UK market, and we would hope as a provider at Royal London that advisors will reach out and use the efficiencies to serve more clients. And then finally, as you think about the models that you might want to build, there's a choice going on between a packaged solution, an out-of-the-box hybrid model, or running a consultancy approach. So some advisors do like tracks to run on, and that's quite understandable. And there's some good packages out there. So Tenet Group, for example, have built a very robust advice solution built on IntelliFlow Office at its core. Simply Biz in the DA world have done likewise with their Centra solution, which is driven by De Facto. Simply Biz will also consult with you as an advisor, like the other support service providers can, and they will look to help you build a bespoke solution of technology, support that human touch that's right for your firm. And we would encourage you to speak to experts in this space, because as the quote from Dan Russell says, British Airways is not entirely run by pilots, and that's a decent analogy to think about how you might embark on building these models going forward. So on the subject of specialists in advice technology, Royal London have recently acquired Wealth Wizards, and Royal London have acquired Wealth Wizards because as the UK's leading life pensions, mutual life pensions and investment provider, we're very focused on helping the customer to get the best client outcomes. And we think the best client outcomes are delivered where our products are recommended by a financial advisor. It's just that we want those financial advisors to deal with more customers. So we think Wealth Wizards can really help the market to to reach out and deal with more clients going forward. So Nick, do you want to just say a few words about that and about Wealth Wizards?
Yeah, thanks, David. Yeah, as far as Wealth Wizards, I mean, it's got the purpose on there as far as make financial advice affordable and accessible to everyone. We've been around 11 years now, and we've developed ultimately a platform that enables customers to self-serve digitally, getting help, getting guidance, and getting digital advice. But the primary driver there is we've always believed in hybrid advice. Hybrid advice is not a new thing for Wealth Wizards. We've always believed that financial advisors are the heart of people wanting to get that advice. So the technology we've developed, which on here, it's called Turo, is one platform, and we'll cover hopefully in the questions as far as advisors worry about technology and how much tech they've already got on their desktop. One of our serving purposes really is to have a look at how we make tech simple and how we make it possible for you as advisors to not worry about IO, Iris, all the existing CRM systems. We will do our best to basically say, you can use our technology to make your lives easier. So, we're all about how do we get your clients to self-serve, potentially do annual reviews, and they come to you when they actually need you. We effectively are on lunch. So on Wealth Wizards' website, you'll see something called MyEva. MyEva is effectively a regulated IFA. So we've got our own regulated IFA permissions. What MyEva does, it's like a financial well-being tool, but it basically gives holistic help and guidance, and then it will give digital advice for those customers that want to top up their pensions, want to put some money into an ISA, but it's got inbuilt vulnerability, it's got inbuilt algorithms to look for inconsistencies, and it will refer customers to advisors when they should be referred. So it gives you that control. But the key thing that this is all about is hybrid advice, I think, is the future. Technology is driving on. COVID's massively changed things. And for us, as IFAs, anyone on this call, it's about embracing technology. It's not a barrier. It's there to help you. It's there to make your lives easier. And it's there so you can do what you're good at, talking to clients and helping clients. Take the heavy lifting away. Tech now should be doing all the heavy lifting for you, not you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Nick. So Nick's touched on this. As a product provider working with a specialist business such as Wealth Wizards, we're very cognizant that we are engaging with advisors in a market where a technology and a hybrid advice ecosystem might already exist. So Origo, the typical advice firm, will already work with 5 different technology partners. So we're aware that we need to integrate with those technology partners to fit in around that model, and also to try and connect all that up in a streamlined process. And Origo and their support of industry standards do an incredible job in that regard. So very cognizant of that existing advisor ecosystem. So that's me in terms of the presentation. I hope that's given everybody some good food for thought and has acted as a catalyst for some questions that we'll answer. So back over to you, Richard.
Brilliant, thank you very much. So really interesting, I think, in some of the work that Royal London are doing, and certainly that Wealth Wizards are doing in terms of trying to have the technology that does that heavy lifting. And certainly, you know, I've seen where clients are really engaging in that providing of that information, and I'm quite happy to do so, and more so. Really what we're going to do from here is to move to a panel session for the next 20 minutes or so, but look to expand on some of the key questions around hybrid advice. In between the questions there, we've got 3 poll questions for the audience, and that's useful for us at LIBF and also the panel members to understand the current market thinking and positioning on hybrid advice. So before I ask the panel, I'm just going to start with the first poll question. Liam, can you put this on screen for me? And this is, does your company already have or plan to implement a hybrid advice model? So if you could answer that as you go along. Okay, and I'm going to share that. I'm going to share those answers with you just so we can actually see where we are on that one. So that seems to have sort of like almost settled off there. So if you could share those results for me as well. And quite interesting, there's already sort of 45% of the audience companies that already have implemented a hybrid advice model, but 55% that haven't. That haven't actually done that yet. I don't know whether that was the more than you were expecting or not, but certainly that's a surprise for me in terms of the numbers that have already started on that journey. That was certainly higher than I expected. Okay, so what I'm going to do then is just go on to the panel then and ask these questions just in turn, as the case may be. From that point of view, one of the first questions I've sort of been asked to ask you is, what are the key benefits of providing a hybrid advice service to clients? And Nick, perhaps you could take that one to start off with. So what are the key benefits of providing hybrid advice?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. I think there's 4 key things for me. And the way I look at these 4 key things, that, you know, the first one is bringing an engaging process. So your clients want to be engaged through their lifetime. So what we do at Wealth is we use a lot of chat. So we're used to Amazon, we're used to Facebook. So we use chat quite a lot to make it an engaging process. So if it's an engaging process, what you've got an onboarding facility, you've got a way of communicating with your clients for annual review, and you've got a way of, you know, 2-way communication. So if they see you as an advisor with a complete engaging process, they still see your brand, they still see you, they don't see technology getting in the way. But for me, clients are far more engaged because they've got a 24-hour service from the IFA or from you as the advisor. Second one is choice. The UK now wants more choice. So with choice, people talk about help, talk about guidance, talk about advice. But if someone just wants to take out another ISA or put £5,000 in an ISA, part of this advice gap is not being able to get to advisors or not being able to get that advice for that small premium, for example. So if I've got the choice to self-serve, get the help, get the guidance, and just go ahead and do the ISA, but still it's part of your business as an advisor, that for me is the second key benefit of hybrid advice. The third one is multi-channel. Hybrid advice should be about interaction with either technology or with you as the advisor, and they should be able to flick. Omni-channel's moved on for me quite a lot. It's now multi-channel. If I want to deal digitally, I'll deal digitally. If I want to deal at 7 o'clock at night, I will do. If I want to come and see my advisor for a bigger piece of advice, perhaps retirement advice, more complicated advice, I can reach my finance advisor still. But the 4th key one that hybrid advice gives you by using algorithm logic is consistency. So all your clients will effectively get consistent advice whenever they go through any process of a hybrid driven process. It's completely consistent. So it'll look at attitude to risk, circumstance, analyze that customer and give you consistent advice, effectively aligned to your advice. So it's like you're giving the advice, but it's being done digitally.
Brilliant. It's interesting. Sam, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, well, absolutely. Firstly, I absolutely agree with everything Nick said there. I suppose for me, it depends really on how you're defining hybrid. And I think it's a definition that the industry is still wrestling with. Essentially, I see it as the use of technology to enrich and enhance the existing role of a financial planner. You could make an argument for the case that hybrid advice is anything from traditional use of a practice management system and IntelliFlow and Iris, all the way through to fully automated algorithmic advice. And I think both have their place and everything in between has its place. it just very much depends on proposition, target client, and I think that's something that the firms have got to be very clear about. If we assume that we are talking about an advice algorithm in some form, I've worked on 20 or so implementations of these types of solutions, and the first thing that we'll ask our clients is, why do you want to do this? And that's probably not a great thing to ask as a consultancy business with a vested interest in the program going ahead, but sensible nonetheless. And the answer is invariably, we want to cultivate a more digital image, a more modern sort of perception. We perhaps want to appeal to the next generation of investor. Maybe we want to service more people. We want to service people with lower pot size, for instance. And the challenge with that is that even if we assume that younger investors are digitally savvy and that they might be more accepting of advice delivered online, their advice leads are no less complex, and they still benefit just as much, if not more so, from those human touch points that Nick and David have mentioned, that reassurance, that explanation of terms and concepts that have previously been alien to them, that financial coaching, really. Even for your relatively simple cases like an ISA buy journey that Nick mentioned there. So when we work with our clients and we start to map out customer journeys, that's when the real benefits to this stuff begins to emerge. There's often two eureka moments when we start to talk about sort of segmenting the clients and everything else, and we start to map out these journeys. We quickly recognize the administrative efficiency that this stuff affords us, and sort of leaders of these programs will go, oh, Christ, we can deliver this to all of our clients. And we said, yes, absolutely. And the second one, I think Nick's already alluded to it there, is that it makes compliance checking, quality assurance processes that much more efficient, that much simpler, because you reduce the disparity in the way that advice is delivered across a firm. So that there really are sort of administrative efficiency benefits coupled with those compliant benefits. You start to look at something really compelling. And I'll throw a third one in. When we sit with our clients too, because this stuff, when you're looking at curating an algorithm, designing an algorithm, it essentially requires the advice practice to have a firm handle on how the firm acts given a set of inputs or variables or client circumstances. And that exercise is a really powerful one, because what it allows the firm to do is define who they are as a business, how they would act, develop their house advice view, and all sorts of sort of cultural and brand principle implications sort of arise as a result. So those are the main three as I see them.
Brilliant. David, anything you'd like to add to what Nick and Sam have said?
No, really, just to summarise what I hear from the market, it has already been covered. The benefits for the advisor, a more efficient process that allows you to strip out costs from your business by using technology to do some of the heavy lifting. And it allows the advisor to run a more consistent process that's more in line with regulatory requirements, which, Sam talked about eloquently. Delivering a proposition that meets the needs of the customer. It's probably fair to point out, though, in terms of the cost saving for the advisor, if they decide to pass that operational cost saving back on, it could be delivered in a cheaper price for the client.
Okay, brilliant. So I suppose we've talked very much about technology and how technology is moving forward. But what changes in technology will advisor firms need to consider, do you think, Sam?
So the big one for me is open banking and open finance. And I know that open banking has been spoken about for some time, and there are some current benefits in terms of data aggregation and giving customers a holistic picture of their finances. And I know that there are some really interesting businesses like Money Hub, Money Info out there doing this stuff and doing it really well. But I think when we look towards open finance and the opportunities that it's going to afford in an advice business, as I said earlier, you're starting to look at something really compelling. If you can get an accurate view of what a customer has reasonably quickly, then it does. I speak to advisors about what the most time-consuming elements of their process are a lot, and the one that they always come back to is going out and gathering information around the current policies and products which a customer holds. The technology is out there to do this stuff, and there are some really interesting businesses out there. I think of sort of a Backer and Pension Lab, and they're doing really great stuff with screen scraping and with integration technology. The tech is there. People can go out and they can interrogate these databases if they're given permission to do so. But unfortunately, this stuff hasn't yet been mandated, and when it is, I think we can be confident that consumers are going to get the best deal out there with advice that's being delivered with greater efficiency, and that can only really have positive implications for the customer. If you think about a point where sort of those products and policies can be gathered sort of seamlessly, and automated advice recommendation can be delivered based on that information and then validated and explained by a human advisor, you're starting to look at something highly efficient and very compelling, which gives us the potential to service more people, but also over a larger geographical area. And I think once you've got that level of competition, then it can only lead to, as I say, positive outcomes for consumers.
Yeah, and certainly the engaging of more and more people into the financial advice process is pretty key to that, isn't it, in terms of that benefit, in terms of what it can. And Nick, what do you think from that point of view? You know, in terms of technology, you know, do you think there's going to be any sort of particular changes in there?
Yeah, I think the way I look at this, and you know, I run a discovery process for Wealth Wizards, where we speak to a lot of companies at that initial stage of what do we need to do with our technology, Nick? How do we actually improve? And often the starting point of that is, well, our technology is not broken, Nick. We don't need to do anything with it. Or as is process is currently working, we're using this as a CRM system. We're using this. Why do we need to actually change? And for me, that is look at what service you're providing with your customer. Look at the end-to-end journey of providing a particular piece of advice. So that might be you're giving pension advice, but look at the time you spend from start to actually finish, and take a back step and go, what's the client experience like if we keep our current technology? So the real drive forward, I completely agree what's just been said about open data. I think open data's still got a little way to go as far as dragging information in and completing a fact find 100%. We've done a lot of testing, using Money Hub, pulling data into our platform to say, what does this tell you about the customer? But the key technology change for me, which has driven real wins for a lot of our bigger clients, is changing the way that you engage from the customer from the start to the finish. So something we call send a fact find. So ultimately, when you look at an advice process, you normally have got onboarding, you've got a first fact find, you've got diagnosis, you've got ultimately then the presentation, and pain points all through that are the customer's feeling that pain as well. So send a fact find for me is technology that every company should now be looking at to say, I've got a meeting with you next week. I'm not going to be asking your name, address, telephone number. You know, we're living in 2021. That should be a complete and utter digital service. So you should be able to collect all the hard facts about your customer digitally. So they can do that online. They can get the pension details. They can input all their income and expenditure. And by the time they meet you, you have a proper engaging conversation on Zoom and Teams, all face-to-face. So the technology effectively has got the hard facts out of the way, and you then do what you're good at. Advisors are very good at getting with people's problems. Technology shifts that away. You talk to people about dreams, aspirations. And the second one I'd like to get out there very much is, often we get, well, I don't want another piece of technology sat on my desktop. I've already got 7, 8, 9 systems that don't talk to each other. That's false. So where we are now, if you look at that, you should be able to say, how can we effectively replace some of those technologies and make it a much smoother process for you as the advisor, but more importantly, your end customers.
Just to jump in very quickly, sorry, Richard, on one of Nick's earlier points around the fact find, I think it's a great point, and Nick's very nobly not mentioned some of the good work that Wealth Wizards have done with MyEva on the behavioural element. So I think there's often a concern that you just send out this massive digital form, ask the client in isolation to run around finding all the pensions assets they've got, and they're very confused by the process. What we see businesses, and particularly Wealth Wizards, doing now is apply those sort of behavioral finance principles to those journeys. They've got a deliberately chat-based design to them, and they can be configured. So you can design it with your brand ethos, your design principles in mind. And there's nothing to say that you can't kick out to an advisor. And we see the sort of appointment scheduling and video chat, that it doesn't have to be as separate as perhaps that description sort of would have you picture.
Completely agree, Sam. I think it's a really good point. We don't send the whole fact find out to a customer. We basically send out chunks of it. So it's effectively, I can complete little bits in my own time. And obviously, you've got two-way messaging then as well. But you know, it's a good thing you brought up there, Sam. I mean, we've currently got a 92% completion rate with a large global bank. So you know, just prove that it's actually working.
Yeah, David. Just in relation to Roland, obviously you deal with lots of different organisations, lots of different types of technology. Is there anything that you see would need to be a major change that people need to consider?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I would start with the with the client with all of this. Coming out of this hiatus, it's a good time, isn't it, to reflect both personally and professionally. So start with the client, the what, the why, the how, why they engage in advice, what they value, all that kind of stuff. And then look at your operation and see what you've already got to deliver that, and look for efficiencies to use technology to do the heavy lifting. Things like process mapping and stuff like that are a good place to start in that analysis. And always try and look for support from experts with that process.
Okay, brilliant.
I think, sorry, Richard, I know it wouldn't take long before I keep butting in. Sorry, but I think I think the issue has not been the availability of technology. I don't think the question is what's emerging in technical terms that's going to help advisors. The question is more, how do we use technology that exists and has existed for some years to work with advisors to create something to service more people? I think we run a number of research projects, and maybe 10 years ago when robo-advice was first mooted, there was sort of this us versus them, and it was well, I'd like to see the robot look into the whites of someone's eyes and truly understand their goals and aspirations and everything now. And I think it's attitudes that are changing, and I think we are going to look at things develop very, very quickly now that COVID has perhaps enforced this attitudinal change around some of these digital solutions.
Okay, well, I think this is a good time for us to ask that second poll question then of the audience, really, that we've got here and the people that have joined us today. So the second poll question we've got is having heard what we've said about hybrid advice and how technology is already there and it just needs to be implemented and used, how likely do you think your company will implement hybrid advice models in the next 3 to 5 years? So we know we've got some that have already done that, a high percentage, but Liam, can you put the poll question up on the screen for us? So if you could take a quick moment to answer those as we go through. So okay, can you put the results up when we think we've got most of the answers there as well, so we can see what we are. So the vast majority would say that for those, assuming that you haven't already implemented one, it's very likely in the next 3 to 5 years, and somewhat likely is the vast percentage of advisors out here today are saying that's going to happen, which it doesn't surprise me, but I'm surprised about the very likely level. That's quite high. So over half saying it's very likely that's going to happen. Anything that surprises you, panel, in terms of that?
Not really. I think what we're seeing with the industry, with the IFAs that we're already dealing with, people are already on this journey. COVID has just pressed the accelerate button, and people have gone, we've got to review this because we've got to look at our margins, etc., going forward, and the service we're providing to customers. The regulators driving down the cost of ongoing charges. It's only going one way with BIP charges. So if you've got to embrace technology, so you look at your business and go, how do we make this such a fantastic customer service, but use technology? And we've used heavy lifting a lot, but use technology to get rid of, the hours and hours and hours that we're spending with customers. So it doesn't surprise me at all.
Okay, brilliant. So I'm conscious a little bit of time, but again, I'm just going to remind all of the attendees that we've got today. Don't forget to ask your questions in the chat window. We've got 1 or 2 that are flowing in there, so thank you very much for those that already have. I think my last question really is about the development and changes that you think are likely to be in the advisor role going forward. So as hybrid advice in the next 3 to 5 years become more and more mainstream, what development and changes do you think that there are likely to be in the advisor role going forward? And Nick, perhaps you could start that one off for us.
Yeah, I think I touched on it, on my last comment there. I think with the way the regulators going with charges, the way digital enhancements are driving fee structures downwards. I think ultimately advisors, everyone on this call is probably looking at my relationship with my clients is going to change. and embrace that change, because they will always look to you as you're the advisor, digitally is just helping me on this journey. So if you look at your current process now, you might think, well, if I don't embrace technology, I've got several pain points in my journey. And the pain points normally are onboarding. How do I onboard and triage clients in an effective way to make sure that if they've got low assets, how am I going to be able to service them going forward? How do I effectively make that first part of my process efficient and engaging with the customers we touched on earlier on? How do I make the diagnosis in between first and second appointment as painless as possible? You know, I've seen some processes where advisors spending hours using multiple different systems where an algorithm technology could be doing that logic for you. And ultimately, it's a better service to your customer. And then the last one there, you know, if advisors still spending 3, 4, 5 hours producing suitability reports, that's wrong. Technology now should be using the fact find, driving the suitability report to be 80, 90% complete. The regulator wants personalization, but technology's developed that much now that when you're fact finding, it picks up that personal touch and effectively fills out that suitability report. So the advisor role, I think, is very much changed to say, I'm not going to spend hours doing fact finding. I'm not going to spend hours doing diagnosis. I am not going to spend hours writing suitability reports. What I'm going to do is I'm going to speak to my clients about what they really, really want. What's important in their lives. That's what you're all good at. You're all good at getting to the real root cause of giving professional advice. That, for me, is where the advisor role is changing. The technology is doing the bits of the job we don't particularly like. I'm going to do what I'm good at as an advisor. I'm going to talk to you about what you really want.
Brilliant. So, Sam, anything that you think is going to change in the advisor role?
I agree again with everything that Nick said. And just to echo his final point there, I don't see any massive changes to the core nature of the role. It's still about sitting down with the client to understand what their position is, what their goals are, and working with them to devise a plan to make that happen. It's still in essence financial coaching. I think we have seen a number of firms or an increase in the number of firms using centralized investment propositions, MPS solutions, and even in wealth management firm, when I speak to our wealth management clients, there's now this separation between those responsible for maintaining the portfolios and those responsible for financial planning. It's about more now than spending hours picking the best collection of funds. It's about working with clients on a personal basis to achieve the best possible outcome given the constraints they have. That's the core nature of the delivery of financial advice, and that won't change. But what will change is the efficiency, as Nick says, with that advice can be delivered with, and ultimately how much time a financial planner has to either service a greater number of customers or to spend more time doing the stuff that they do very well, sitting with customers and coaching them through the process.
Okay. And I think from what you said, there's really interesting, as a recently retired advisor, the changes that we've seen, in terms of the role over the last few years, I think they're going to be accelerated from what you've said there in terms of how you do things. David, anything that you want to add to that?
Yeah, the role of the advisor in the process at the front end, dealing, with the client, living that human touch should not change. It's the goals and aspirations of retirement planning. It's the care of dealing with a death claim. That is the very essence of what a customer wants. And I speak as a customer, not just a practitioner in the industry. And it's the bits behind the advisor that need to change. Perhaps the way that we set up administration in advice firms, paraplanning, all this kind of stuff. It's that heavy lifting that will change first.
Okay, brilliant. Good time for our last poll question from this one. Then it's really, I suppose, Liam, if you could put it on the screen for us today. It's the last poll question is, do you think advisors will develop their knowledge and skills to level 6 as a result of the introduction of hybrid advice? So becoming more holistic, more detailed in the advice that they give, rather than mass market. Okay, so interesting. I can see the sort of results as they come in, as the case may be. So we're just going to share those as the case may be on those. And you know, again, an over sort of majority of people saying yes. You know, they do think that there'll be more and more advisors moving to level 6, and maybe having more capacity from not doing that heavy lifting allows them to spend more specialist time in, and as you say, really truly dealing with those clients' holistic needs as they go through. Okay, again, that's very interesting to see that, and you know, I'm a bit surprised to see that the amount in that saying yes on that one, to be honest. Nick, is that a surprise to you?
No, I think there's a realization from advisors that step into that next level. You know, it's something that some clients are actually starting to ask for as well. It's no longer good enough to be level 4. You know, myself, you know, being a member of the LBIF to the standard I am, it really enhances your knowledge. So going to level 6 is not just about picking a textbook up and thinking, oh, I know more now. It's about actually coming across with your clients with that level of detail that really proves that you care about what happens to their dreams and aspirations. So you're getting quality education by going up to level 6. So you're becoming a better practitioner, in my opinion.
Okay, brilliant. I think just conscious of time, we've got sort of 10 minutes sort of left of where we are. And I think it would be perhaps a good time just to maybe go on to one or two of those questions that have been asked already. I'm just going to sort of run through these and say there's one here which is one I think for you, Nick. Wealth Wizards takes the heavy lifting from the advisor is a phrase that you've used. What would you consider to be the heaviest lifting, and what parts of this does the Wealth Wizards system help with most?
Yeah, brilliant question. I don't know who asked that, but yeah, heavy lifting for me is the way we look at heavy lifting is you look at the end-to-end process. So we do a lot of work with advice practices that have an end-to-end process that sometimes is 35 to 50 hours long from start to finish. So what we define as the heavy lifting is the onboarding. How are you currently onboarding your clients? Because that now should be a digital process. It shouldn't be a long-winded process for the client to start to engage with you. The second bit of heavy lifting is fact-finding. We've already commented on fact-finding. Technology now, and certainly Wealth Wizards technology, we've got the fact-finding now down to digitally complete the hard facts, do the hybrid part for the soft facts, which is the dreams, aspirations of your customers. The third bit of a heavy lifting process, which obviously adds a lot of time norm to that 35 to 50 hours, is diagnosis in between first and second. If we can design algorithms that match to your advice policy, why are we spending 4, 5, 6, 7 hours in diagnosis? You don't need to. An algorithm should be able to align to cash flow modeling or to your advice policy. So ultimately, that part's removed, and you've still got control over that. Advice doesn't, you know, Robert doesn't take over. It effectively just gives you that consistency. The algorithm is like you're giving the advice. It's aligned completely to your advice policy. And the fourth part of heavy lifting is the suitability report. You know, I've been in this industry a long time, but we're still seeing 6 and 7 hours spent writing suitability reports. We've now driven that right down at Wealth Wizards, where we can get it down now to 30, 35 minutes, because ultimately that should be the fact find that's populating that. As you're talking to your customer, digitally, the suitability rate should be being created behind the scenes. That's how far technology's gone, and that's how we define heavy lifting. The end result of getting rid of the heavy lifting, an example I can give you there is, we've driven an advice process down for one of our customers from 35 hours to 9 hours end to end, and technology's done that. You ask the customer what they think about that, better experience. You ask the advisor, I got more quality time with my customers. I've now freed up more capacity in my diary, and you get some funny answers. You either get, I'm going to go and play more golf now, or I can see more customers.
Brilliant. No, brilliant. I'm not sure who would like to take this one, but it's might be one for you, Sam. It's how might technology, especially for AI and full advice, impact the liability model? Is there still a need for the skin in the games as with airline pilots?
Yeah, well, I think, you know, I'll take that one because you sort of use that quote and that analogy, Richard. again, it goes back to the consistency and robustness of advice delivery that an element of automation can give, and the use of tools to deliver that automation. That consistency is great in terms of keeping in line with regulation and providing a compliant advice process. There's some real benefits to be gained there in support of the advisor.
Okay. Anything else? Anybody else want to add anything to that one?
I think just to comment on the definition of AI, people use AI as like, well, artificial intelligence. Are we going to go to a future of Alexa, put another £50 in my pension? We don't see AI at that stage yet. AI is about ultimately the machine learning from how you are fact finding your customers. So, for example, if we loaded 200 of your pension consolidation cases through an algorithm, the algorithm can very, very quickly learn what your advice policy is. So if you load 200 cases in, it should give you, well, the advice policy of this company, it looks like this is how you treat consolidation cases. This is how you look at your GARs. This is how you look at this. So I think when we say AI, let's be careful. AI for me, the way I look at it is machine learning. The machine is learning from inputs it's being driven.
And it does, and I think one of the other questions I've just noticed there does raises a really interesting challenge. If we say that doing everything via an algorithm can ensure consistency, can reduce quality assurance and compliance checking time, but it introduces a new challenge, and that's how do you govern the algorithm? Firstly, how do you make sure that the inputs are being executed in the way that you expect them to? How do you make sure that those advice rules are compliant? And that's where partnering with sort of experienced businesses like Wealth Wizards, who are experts in those sorts of things. So whilst that can be a daunting challenge, there are people out there that have been doing this for over 15 years now.
Okay, couple of quick questions. One is a very long question. I'm just going to try and summarize this one. So the Origo and Lancat Disconnected Advisor World Report says it all. It says a typical advice firm could be 100% more administratively efficient if systems were properly integrated. Of that, 85% of advice firms agree that lack of integration is a major cause of inefficiency. So how would the integration of more technology ensure that you can ensure that there's more integration rather than that greater disconnect?
I don't think anyone's disputing the fact that a more integrated ecosystem would be better for the customers, but there are some very practical challenges associated with doing that. Some of the programs I work on, we get very frustrated where people say things like, "I would just API it together," and then you think to yourself, "Well, I've seen that take 9 months and several £1 million to achieve." Someone's got to fund that integration. Someone's got to resource that integration, and ultimately, someone's got to master the data. And I think without open standards around that data, you're going to find it very, very difficult to reach a consistent data format that allows for that level of integration.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's something that Wealth Wizards look closely at. The Lancat report, the disconnected world. I truly believe in what they're saying. What we're trying to do at Wealth Wizards is effectively say, if you've already got a lot of tech on your desktop, what we won't do is say, we're going to replace everything and we're going to give you one platform. Anyone that says that, lives in cloud cuckoo land. You've got to have a look at this to say, what are you using as your CRM provider? Where's your master data being held? What can you do in the middle part of the process, but ensure that everything talks to each other in a streamlined way to say, this is where the client starts, this is where the client finishes, this is what technology will need to do that, and you might be using 7 or 8 bits. For me, it's about how do you drive that down to not 7 or 8 bits, less bits. I don't think any one provider can say, we've got the whole ecosystem wrapped up. So for me, it's about have a look at joining that up in the most effective way. So you're not looking at your desktop thinking, every single time I see a client, I'm using 7 or 8 bits of tech.
Yeah. And it is fun to envisage. And if you're an advisor with a new client, you can imagine sitting down into your back office system or whatever it might be and saying, Joe Bloggs, here's his national insurance number. And the integrations say, oh, Joe Bloggs has got these products dotted around these providers. Would you like to transfer them to provider X based on your current proposition? As I say, it needs those standards of data. Firstly, it needs the data being made available, and seeding providers are often terrified of making that data available because they don't want the assets to leave where they're currently being held. So I do believe that it needs to be mandated, and we're seeing it. So I think the FCA call for action on open finance closed relatively recently, and I'm really excited to see what comes back, because I think once that stuff's available and those integrations are mandated, then you could see some really exciting use cases come off the back of it.
Brilliant. So we've only got one last question really, which I'm just going to, so we'll cover that off here. That saves us having to do the podcast, if that's okay, and then we'll finish off. It's a very simple one. What do the regulators say about giving advice offshore whilst you're on holiday? So I'm using technology offshore to advise somebody in the UK on holiday. You should be on holiday. You shouldn't be advising clients whilst you're on holiday. That would be my answer to that one, but that's just me.
It's a good question, because if you're on holiday sat by the swimming pool, it's this question of, should you be doing digital advice? Should you be doing some on holidays? One bit, but the other bit is, as long as that algorithm logic is assigned to UK regulation, doesn't really matter where you're doing it in the world. And wealth wizards have proven that we can scale outside the UK and we can go global with regards what our algorithms actually do. But to answer the question specifically, as long as you are using UK legislation, UK advice rules, doesn't matter where you are, as long as obviously you're checking UK residency rules, etc. before anyone says, that's wrong, Nick.
Okay, no, thank you very much for that. So I think for me, really, I'm just going to finish off just with one final thought that I'm going to share with you, if that's okay. And this is, just bear with me 1 second, just one last thought. When I looked at this, it was from Socrates, but not that Socrates. This is Socrates that's a character in a recent, an old publication. And you have many habits that weaken you. The secret of change is to focus all your energy not on fighting the old, but on building the new. And I think, without any shadow of a doubt, we're seeing hybrid advice, and everyone's agreed almost that hybrid advice is going to be the future of advice in the UK to some degree. But it's how we now engage that and go forward and accept that advice. From me and those changes, thank you very much to our panel, David, Nick and Sam. Very thought-provoking and very interesting. And also thank you to all of you that's joined us today on this webinar. And I hope to see you again at another webinar in the future. So thank you very much for joining us at the LIBF today. And thank you again, David, Nick, Sam. Your input has been really, really interesting and valuable.